Fear, which is very palpable and is very overpowering, begins to turn into a level of white-hot hate that then turns into cold indifference, where you really don't give a shit about who's on the other side of that muzzle flash, you just want them to die. And then muscle memory starts taking over because you've spent hours and hours firing at thousands of human silhouettes. And so at that point, heart and soul shuts down, and just rote memory of what you've been trained to do kind of takes over. It's really easy to kill somebody if you practice it enough. Yeah, I was playing G.I. Joe and doing all that kind of stuff as a kid, but never seriously considered military service. And then going into my junior year of college, the very beginning of my junior year was 9/11. At the ripe old age of whatever I was, 20, there's a sense of right and wrong, and there's a sense of the idea that, hey, there are people who, are committing acts of terror. They seem to be concentrated around Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we should go get them, right? I mean, that was pretty much it. But then that also sort of selfishly served a purpose for myself of answering questions about who am I and what am I capable of. And sort of perversely, I think the thought process was even that, and it sounds so stupid, but there's an element of truth to it, that I'm gonna get the hard part of my life out of the way. That I'm gonna go just kick my ass and let them give me whatever they can give me, and prove to myself that I can survive training and whatever is involved in that. And then everything else will just be kind of downhill from there.
On the meaning of sacrifice and service, Pat Tillman, who gave up a multi-million-dollar contract in professional football, has been killed.
We were conducting combat operations on the Afghan-Pakistan border, and we had vehicle issues with one particular vehicle within our platoon, and we had difficulty getting the right part in, and we were trying to tow it out, and it was kind of a fiasco. But anyway, there was two different objectives that the TOC, the Tactical Operations Command, wanted to accomplish. One was they wanted the broken vehicle back to a hardball road, which was about 12 miles away, and then they wanted another village cleared. You couldn't do both of those at once. And so against the strenuous objectives of our platoon leader, our platoon was ordered to be split. And so one half of the platoon was to escort the vehicle back to Hardball Road, the other half was to clear the objective. Pat Tillman, he was in the first element that went to clear the objective. I was in the second element that was escorting this vehicle back to Hardball Road. And then at dusk, as we moved out with no communication basically between both elements, we came under fire. An IED kicked off an ambush in the canyon that we were in. And so the immediate thought was, this is where I'm going to die. And then you start seeing muzzle flashes, and you start having something to shoot at. And so, our team leader on our vehicle engaged that position. I fired a couple bursts from my weapon, and then immediately thereafter, we stopped. Ceasefire was called. That night, as we were sitting on the vehicle, waiting to move back, I found out that we had 4 casualties, 2 wounded and 2 KIA. I looked up, and one of the guys in the vehicle who was manning the 50 cal, his head was just kind of, on his chest. Information was starting to flow through the platoon that they had found 50 cal rounds in the rock behind where Pat was killed. And so he had made the conclusion that he was probably responsible for, at the very least, Pat's death. But then for me, that was sort of just like, wait, what? I fired there too. That's what I was pondering for the next 5 hours in the middle of the night as we drove back to the FOB.
My eyes are wide open. I see you clear.
Moral injury is a violation of our own sacred beliefs and connections to human beings.
Anytime humans are violating basic principles of life and doing things that are atrocities, is going to raise specters of a spiritual type injury or a wound. You know, like killing children or women or others who are not having a weapon themselves. So what we call collateral damage. And it's usually always after the war or after a deployment when people have time to process it, where they start questioning, could I have done something to stop it? Could I have spoken out, and why didn't I? And then the guilt or shame that might come from not having had decided differently.
The Army did two 15-6 investigations, which were virtually identical. And in hindsight, we didn't know this, but the Army was basically just trying to close the book on what happened so that they could tell their narrative to the world. And then you get back and then you start discovering things like the family had been lied to, like the Silver Star citation that was read on national television by a former Navy SEAL was actually a lie. And you realize all of that had been happening while you were in country. And then very quickly you get called to an office and you're told that you're being released for standards, which is RFS, that's the acronym in the regiment, for lack of weapons discipline, and then you're gone.